My name is Simon, and I'm the Chief Librarian at the Library of Spolia. Today, I will show you the library and its catalogue, a new public institution for the reuse of architectural fragments in Rome, and a set of instructions on how they could be reused. Its origins came from a forgotten case reopened a few years ago, which speculated on the reuse of a group of materials salvaged during the fascist demolitions. Starting in the mid-20s and continuing over the next decade, Rome underwent major demolitions that resulted in 2 million cubic meters of material removed. The operations took place at the core of the city, opening cuts and voids that became new backdrops for the unfolding and celebration of fascist political life. The collection of fragments was generated from discarded layers, deemed impure by a propaganda which sponsored unhygienic, infrastructural, and archaeological renewal of the city. The list categorized a city in fragments, selected according to their artistic value, and organized in different typologies. Each entry of this inventory is a register of a deconstructed place, varying from details to walls, floors, and ceilings. Letters choreographed the removal of fragments from the stage of selection to their relocation into warehouses, initially established as temporary spaces with the intention of reusing the materials in future constructions. But the project for the reuse largely failed, leaving behind materials stockpiled in locations around Rome's city center. An investigation into the existing sites led to the survey of 4 different stores. After 80 years, a stasis still characterizes this body of materials. These snapshots describe the present condition, where the store fragments can be seen in most cases left deteriorating and stored in a haphazard manner. This failed project became the starting point to rethink the inaccessible stores as a new public infrastructure of reuse, a material library capable of endlessly collecting and recycling the fabric of the city. The library offers 2 strategies: a new system for storing the fragments, an accumulative structure that will begin collecting and cataloging parts of the city, turning them into a public resource, and the catalogue, a manual for the reuse of fragments in urban space. As a new institution, the library sets out a system for borrowing and maintaining of a public collection of fragments. It sits in between contractors and organizations, managing materials salvaged from demolition sites and offering their reuse through public tenders, as a means to maintain them as public resource. Materials are selected from urban areas under redevelopment and transferred to the library. They can later be borrowed for a typical loan period of 47 years. Extensions may be agreed. By scanning and cataloging, the library turns fragments of the city into a stored accessible public resource. The library is located along the slopes of the Aventine Hill, a site that historically was used as a collection center for marble and stone. Before the project, the site presented a landscape dotted with traces from this old route. Its past function lay dormant at the core of contemporary Rome. The heart of this new institution is the architecture of the library, which extends, forming a linear structure set along the hillside, river, and its embankment, recovering the lost function of the Aventine slopes as a route for the arrival and collection of materials. In embracing the existing topography and river, its frame connects a series of found conditions, forming the possibility of a public circulation along its topography, vegetation, old retaining walls, vaulted structures, vacant buildings, embankment, staircases, and ramps. A bridge stitches the two sides, connecting the hillside to the river embankment, the port of Ripa Grande. A new arrival and departure point, which repurposes the river's commercial use. Together, this linear space opens a new edge of public circulation for cycling and pedestrian use. The library is a space in constant transformation. Its framework might be imagined as a structure that supports an ongoing process of accumulation, resulting in a layering of materials. In this library, we tend to organize materials according to physical properties, size and weight. Lifting and installation alternate mechanical and physical movement. As a physical presence in the city, it aims to bring the culture of reuse at the core of its contemporary life, by providing a framework to combine storage and display for a constantly changing collection of materials. Not only becoming a repository of materials, but also a space that enables their exhibit and study. Through this new system, the library becomes a public space of gathering Rome's fragments and celebrating its contrasting cultural expressions. The catalogue develops an approach for the reuse of fragments in the context of Rome, starting from an expanded definition of spolia, combining old and contemporary techniques to form a set of instructions as a manual for the reuse of each fragment, offering a matrix of possible connections to their new contexts. I will now show you 4 recent cases of public tenders where we borrowed a series of materials for the design of 4 junctions in Rome. The fragments reused here can be seen extending from a project of mere relocation to explore the potential value and character that can be added to neglected spaces of the city through a process of connecting its contrasting identities and stories. From the restoration of cultural venues to the refurbishment of public transport, from the refitting of schools to the reuse in new housing developments, the fragments become elements carrying and celebrating Rome's plural identity and promoting a unique way in which the city will continue to transform. In bequeaths, the library acts as an intermediary entity, gathering the salvageable parts and carrying them onwards for their future reuse. It opens the possibility of an endless circularity, as it argues that if maintained well, the reuse of building parts could go beyond a second life and reach multiple adaptations on a longer time span. For many years, it was believed that Rome could be defined. Acts of rewriting, scraping, editing, grafting, all on the same surface, in search for one truth. Playing a parallel role, the library yields not one truth, but many multiple truths. If an eternal traveler were to cross it in any direction, after centuries, he would see the same fragments repeated in the same disorder, which thus repeated would be an order. Layers from the past are gathered and connected with the present, each time forming new meanings and associations. In this constant transformation, it is clear that the space of the library is not static, but unlimited and cyclical. The library aims to become an infrastructure supporting Rome's future transformations. As the city faces an impending transformation of its peripheries, and examples of its modern architecture are being preserved as heritage. Shifting laws and criteria blur the lines of what is historically and culturally worth preserving, calling for a plural understanding of its identity. In this context, we, at the Library of Spolia, believe that this framework will support Rome's ongoing transformation as an endless recycling of its built fabric. Nothing is lost, and everything is transformed.